Hey guys, it's me, Ghosty Girl Tip from Drinks&Discussions-TrueCrime. Back in October, we posted a video called The Story of Gary Plauché that was a story about Gary Plauché and his son Jody, who was the victim of a pedophile named Jeff Doucet. In that story, his dad Gary provided some vigilante justice, and we have had the honor of doing a one-on-one interview with me and Jody, the son in the story, and that is coming at you right now. But in case you missed it, we are going to, immediately following the interview, we are going to show you a repeat of the post we did in October of the full story of everything that happened to Jody with all the details so that you are in the loop. So we hope you enjoy it. This is a very special production done only exclusively by Drinks and Discussions. Welcome back to Drinks and Discussions True Crime. I am your host today, Ghosty Girl Tiff, and I have a very special guest with us, Jody Plauché. The name may sound familiar because back in October we did a video featuring him and his dad. And usually in our stories, the person who killed someone is the monster, but in this case, the monster is the one who was actually shot because he was a pedophile. So we have the honor of speaking with Jody today. Jody, tell us what you are doing now. I read that you were a victims advocate and that you are also an author. So tell me a little bit about that.
All right, so in 1993, I was at Northlake College, right there in Irving, Texas, um, and I decided it was time to write one. And so I would go to the computer lab after class and after I got all my homework done, and I would sit down and I started writing. And I did this for a couple of months, and I came up with about 27,000 words. Well, I kind of felt like it wasn't complete. So I decided at the beginning of 1994 to move back to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where I grew up, because all the people that I needed to interview for the book, and I figured they were here, so I needed to get that done. But eventually, I enrolled back in LSU, and I graduated from college in 1997 from Louisiana State University. And I immediately wanted to head back to the Dallas Fort Worth area. So I got an apartment in Irving, and I immediately after graduating in May of '97 moved back to Irving. I worked as a DJ karaoke host for a year and a substitute taught. And finally, one night I came home. I just did an internet search, child sexual abuse prevention, and I ended up getting a job in Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Philadelphia in Montgomery County. And basically, I put the book on hold. Um, Fast forward from 1998, I moved home in 2005, like 2 months before Katrina, and it wasn't until 2016 that a friend of mine was like, "Hey, are you ready to finish your book?" And I was like, "Yeah." So we met with some people. I hired a book writing company, and in like early 2017, we started the process of them interviewing me, and my book writing company was going to write the book. So we're going to basically start over. Well, uh, September 2017, they sent me their first draft of what was going to be my book, and I didn't really like it. It was kind of more like a self help book. It wasn't like a. It didn't tell the story, and so I went digging through my old, probably like an old red floppy disk, that I had an old computer with, and I was able to find the 27,000 words I had written in 1993, and we basically combined the two, and my book was published the end of August of 2019. Title of the book is Why Gary Why, and if you've ever seen the video, the cop when my dad shoots my karate teacher, the cop yells Gary Why Gary, and everybody's brain hears Why Gary Why. So even though that's not the quote that he said, everybody remembers Why Gary Why. So that was the title of my book, and I was set to go out and do speaking engagements. I had like 5 speaking engagements all across the country: Gulf Shores, Alabama. I was going to go to Charleston, South Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina. I was going to go back up to Pennsylvania, and I was going to go to Whistler, Vancouver, uh, basically Canada.
Wow.
And then what happened? Then what happened? Then COVID hit. So all of those speaking engagements got canceled. Thankfully, now I've got one in the New Orleans in a couple of weeks, and then I'm going to Richmond, Virginia in April. So hopefully that can get back up and running, and I can speak full time because that's what I hope to do. Right now, I'm just working with some friends of mine, helping them out at a specialty meat store. But that's what I've been doing since COVID. But now that things are getting back to normal, I want to speak full time, and I just feel like I'm not doing enough. I want to be out there more. I want to be helping people. I want to spread the message, and I've been locked up for 3 years. I'm ready to get started.
Right. That's so impressive. I think that that's awesome. That's amazing. And I really hope that you can get that started super quickly because that's so necessary in like the society that we live in, so that there are not more victims, and instead they turn their lives around like you have, and instead of living their life with like a victim mentality, they use that to help other people. And I just think that's really impressive. Do you think that writing the book and doing all this, is that therapeutic for you?
Probably back in '93 it was, but
Yeah.
in 2017, it'd been years had passed, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. But looking back, maybe in 1993 it was.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, 27,000 words. I mean, you had a lot to say for sure. And the link for your book is going to be in the description of the video. It's also in the description of the video that we posted in October, the original story. So go buy that book on Amazon and read it. Very interesting stuff in there. So like you said, when you were 11 years old, you were targeted by someone who basically they groomed your family. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's what all child sexual abusers do. They don't just groom the child; they groom the whole.
Right. So, like his whole, do you think that there was a reason that he targeted your family?
I would say access. He had access to us because he was our karate teacher, and we went on uh, karate trips. We'd go to Houston to go to tournaments. We'd go to New Orleans to tournaments. We fought locally here in Baton Rouge. Just he had access to us, and he had the trust of the adults.
Right. So, I mean, you were only 11 years old, and when you're that age, you're kind of living in the world, kind of oblivious to everything. But was there ever a time that you thought, okay, this guy's kind of weird?
Oh, immediately I knew he was. And actually, I was 10 when the abuse started, and
Okay.
I knew immediately that it was. I knew immediately that he was someone that my mother had told me about that would, you know, not be or not hurt kids, but they take advantage of children. So I knew when he started touching me, okay, he's one of these.
So, obviously, he assaulted you. Were you the focus of the abuse, or do you think there was other kids, or maybe if there was other kids
Oh,
that were in the same class?
I know there were. No, I know there were other kids. Um, there's a few I speculate about, but there's one I know because he was a year older than me, and he was kind of Jeff's love interest before he got too old. He was a year older than me, so he started to go through puberty, and so when that happened, he kind of traded him in for me,
Oh,
and,
that is
and I saw him.
wow. That is just horrific because I mean, I can't imagine how many parents trusted this person, and then he took advantage of them. And obviously, your parents also trusted him. After the crime, did your parents become like super overprotective of you and your siblings?
The funny thing was, is my mother was overprotective before anything ever happened. So that's the weird. But I mean, other than like silly things like not letting us cross Perkins Road, which is a busy road near our house, or Segan Lane, which is another road close by. Other than not letting us cross the street, not really. I mean, we still would. I spent the night over at my friend's house, and he spent the night over here. We go to the Saints game. My best friend Brian would come in. So I don't think they were protected enough.
Good. So you got to live still a fairly normal childhood after those traumatic events happened to you. And you were a victim of really horrific crimes, I think. And you're not a victim today. How did you come out of that victim mentality?
One, I think a lot goes to my mother because she would make us watch after school specials. I remember um, something for Joey about a boy with leukemia and his brother won the Heisman Trophy, and so we watched that. And there was another called Fallen Angel, and that's the one where the guy was like taking pictures of children, and it was like child pornography. And so my mother told me there are people like that. So immediately when Jeff started to mess with me, I was able to identify, okay, it's not my fault. Whenever he would let's say perform a sex act on me orally, him on me, um, even though my body was functioning like a human body and it was a pleasure to it, my brain wasn't feeling pleasure. I was still like, okay, shouldn't be happening. So I never blamed myself for the way my body responded. And if you're a 7-year-old little girl and a creepy uncle starts molesting you when you're 7 and you don't know anything about human sexuality, um, then let's say you're 14 when it stops. Well, at some point, your body is going to respond, and they carry that guilt over with them. Like, how can I enjoy that?
Right.
And it's not their fault. Your body's just responding like a human body.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's totally 100% true. And I think that a lot of people do carry around that guilt. And even some people who target children will blame the children and say, well, they liked it. Well, they didn't really like it, but your body has pleasure sensors on it that make your brain think this is pleasurable, even though it's a bad, horrific situation. It's confusing for someone. And I'm glad that you were able to separate that and not blame yourself for that because it's 100% not your fault. I know you know that. So Jeff took you.
I'll tell you one more thing that I actually think helped in my mental well-being. Um, I hate to say it, but I think the public nature of my father shooting him, it wasn't something that I could keep quiet. I could keep hidden from everybody, and it festers. And 20 years later, I've cut myself, and I've had eating disorders. So due to the public nature, Daddy shooting Jeff, I never had to worry about running into Jeff again. I was on Geraldo back in 1991, the first talk show me and Daddy ever did, and there was a guy who was molested by like a Boy Scout leader or something. Well, his best friend was when he was a boy, this girl was his best friend. Well, she ended up marrying that guy after she grew up, and she had a young son. Well, he freaked out. He didn't tell her about what happened to him. And eventually that guy started molesting that young son, and he carried that guilt with him. So I never had any of that. Daddy took care of all that.
Right, right. Well, and your dad is considered an American folk hero. I mean, truly, anyone I've ever talked to about this story, they have the utmost respect. And most people would say that they would do the same thing if they had the opportunity to do that. Um, but do you think that it's appropriate or inappropriate, or do you have an opinion on people thinking of your dad as a hero?
Um, it doesn't bother me, and I'll tell you why. Because there are so many victims of sexual abuse or sex crime that never get any justice. And I think that what my dad stands, he stands as a symbol to them, those whose voiceless voices have never been heard or accounted for. I think he stands up to or he's a symbol to a lot of people who didn't get justice.
Right, because you weren't, even with Jeff, you weren't the only one. So I think even with that act, more people than just your family got justice. Because, like you said, he did molest other children, and even he admitted that he molested other children, and he didn't even know how many it was. Um, so, yeah, I think your dad provided justice in a very big way for many, many people. Um, so,
Think about how many times a parent says, someone would do that to my kid. I do exactly. I'd kill him. Everybody says it. Daddy and Ellie Nessler has done it.
that's right. That's right. No, absolutely. And even when me and Brian discussed this story, We said you can say what you say, but you never really know what you're going to do when you're in that situation. But we know what your dad would do because 20,000 people saw it on TV. And since then, I think 20 million people have viewed that video. And, I think that there's been a lot of focus on obviously you and your dad, but there was not a lot of focus on your mom. So, what did your mom think about this?
Um, my mother did her job as far as like people go, oh, did you get counseling? I'm like, I did. They made me go see a psychiatrist. But I only went for like 6 months, and he told my mother like, I don't need to see him anymore. He's gonna be fine. But she was really my counselor. She was the one that I would open up to originally. Her role as a counselor, she did a very good job. As far as the whole situation, I think it still gets to her. She did an interview. I want to say it was with ESPN, and 2013. And I told her, I said, look, this is the last time I'll ask you. And ironically enough, I had her do one more, but that was different. It wasn't an interview for like another show. It was like for my project that we were working on. But, um, it affects her differently because I was her child and her husband killed somebody.
Right.
So she doesn't like seeing Jeff's face. I can watch it; it doesn't bother me. But after we did the ESPN, I got a call from NBC, Investigation Discovery, actually, and they called me and they said, will your mother do the interview? As a matter of fact, I said, she won't, and I won't even ask her. And he was like, why? I was like, because she did an interview a year ago for ESPN, and I told her I would never ask her to do another interview again. I feel like she gets too upset. And he
Right.
goes, well, why does she get upset? I'm like, because her kid was raped and her husband killed somebody? I'm like, that's kind of upset people. And he goes, I understand.
Definitely. No, as a mother, I definitely understand that. I try to put myself in her shoes and think, what would I think? And I think it would be just too much to deal with all at once, really. Um, you know, but
So when I do my, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I would say when I do my presentations, I show the little 15-minute clip that ESPN did for E60. And there's a scene in there where Tom Rinaldi looks at my mother and is like, did you have to ask Gary why? Why did he do that? And my mother looks at the camera and she says, no. She said, that's, I think when I looked at Gary and said, the least you could have done was let me drive you. And when I play that part, everybody that's watching, they bust out laughing because I mean, what a better response to that? Hey, you get all the hero, you get all the credit. I was his mother. I'm a parent too. I mean, at least let me drive you.
Right. So, um, you know, when did you see the video for the first time? Like, how old were you? Did you see it when you were a kid, or did you wait till you were an adult
Yeah, no,
to?
no, I saw it the next day.
Okay,
I didn't watch the news. It was a Friday night, and I didn't watch the news that Friday night. I went to bed. I fell asleep early, and the
right,
next morning we were out of our camp on a lake. It's called False River. And so Daddy didn't show up that night. And the next morning, Daddy wasn't around. And my grandparents were like, come on, get in the car, pack up. We're going back to Baton Rouge. And we didn't know why. And so we're like, where's Daddy? And I knew my parents were, something had happened. Something bad had happened. And I didn't have a take on what it was. And so when we got to my grandparents' house, my mother showed up being driven in a police car by my Uncle Robert, her brother. So then I really knew something bad had happened. And my initial thought, because my dad was drinking a lot back then, because my parents were separated, was that Daddy had gotten in a fatal car accident because he was drunk driving. And so that's when my mother sat the four kids down and she said, last night, Jeff came back from California. And when they got to the airport, Daddy shot. And at the time, he wasn't legally dead. He was on life support. But she was like, and Daddy shot and killed Jeff. And I kind of got upset because I didn't want Jeff to die at the time.
right.
I think one of my siblings said good. Another one said my daddy's going to get in trouble. My daddy's going to go to jail. And I think my older brother was just indifferent. He didn't like Jeff anyway, so he could care less.
Yeah, right. Were you like scared when obviously you knew something bad had happened, you were worried, but when you did find out what happened and you found out that your dad was arrested, were you scared that your dad would never be coming home and that you had gone through all this trauma and been away from your parents and now you were going to be away from your dad forever?
At the time, no. And actually, another thing happened, which I'm not going to say, but well, I mean, I could kind of say it because it's in the book. My dad knew a lot of people. Right? My dad was a little league coach. He was a salesman, and his job was to entertain, take people out, buy them lunch. He would he would bar hop from bar to bar. I mean, my dad knew a lot of people in this town. And I tell people all the time, my dad knew so many people in Baton Rouge he could get away with murder, and he did. And so, knowing a lot of people and knowing, that Mike Burnett and my dad, they weren't like friends; they were acquaintances. He was the police officer that kind of helped with the investigation. I knew, like they weren't going to turn on Daddy. I
Right.
mean, charged him with he charged him with attempted second degree murder, which was a favor right there. Because I mean, a lot of people clearly think it was first degree, like my dad had planned it, but my dad didn't know what he was going to do. He went to the airport. He didn't know whether he was going to hit him, spit at him, or shoot him. He just had the gun just in case the opportunity arose. So I
Right.
don't, I don't. If my dad would have planned it, he screwed it up. Um, my dad just went on an impulse, and so that right there was another thing. He got out on Monday. He posted bail. He went to a psychiatric hospital, and I never worried one day that my dad was going to spend the rest of his life in jail, or even a significant of time in jail, because I just knew my dad knew a lot of people, and that I don't want to say it would take care of it because it wasn't taken care of. He pled no contest to manslaughter. He was a convicted felon. He couldn't own a gun. I think he lost his right to, even though he still was able to. Yeah, I mean, but I never worried about that.
I'm so glad to hear that because I just think that would have been so much for you to deal with all at once. But just knowing that you were kind of just at peace with that part of it, with your dad being freed relatively quickly, I think that's great. Um, Speaking of your dad, was he did he go out shooting a lot? Was he like an expert marksman? Because I think that was a damn good shot that he had at the airport.
He didn't go out shooting a lot. I mean, he would take us hunting, but we'd never kill anything because I mean, he would pick up stray animals. He would feed the squirrels, critter corn, and I mean, that just wasn't my dad. And so apparently, and I was a kid and I wouldn't have known this, but like if we were out at the camp, and they were shooting at like bottles and cans and stuff like that, apparently my dad was just a really good shot. He wasn't trained; he was just a good shot. And I didn't realize how good of a shot it was until recently with the social media, because all these people are like on Twitter, or they'll be like, "Oh, look at Gary Plauché, 180 no scope that guy. Ooh, that's a heck of a shot." Blah blah blah. And I do remember that first time we went on Geraldo. We had never gotten any pushback. Everyone was always very supportive of my dad. And the first question from the audience, this old man looked at my dad and goes, "How do you trust yourself to go into a public building and start blasting away?" And my dad kind of got offended, and he looked at the guy and he said, "When I looked down the barrel of that gun, I knew it was exactly what I was hitting." And we go to commercial break, and I look over at Daddy. He's still staring at me. I said, "Daddy, stop it." And he's like, "Okay, all right." But um, he was just a good shot.
Wow. I love that. I love because I mean, really, he was so close to the sheriff that was escorting him, and I just thought it was like perfect timing. Everything that he did, you would have thought that he would have planned it down to a T, but I mean, I'm not telling you anything, but he just kind of, this was a kind of thing of the moment that happened, and it just all the pieces fell into place so perfectly. But you know, when your dad went to the airport, did he? I know he called several people when he was there. Did he tell those people his plans, or was he just calling them to kind of be on the phone?
No, he was calling his best friend. Jim Adams was his name. His nickname was Stinky. So Daddy was on the phone with Stinky, and Stinky called the sheriff's department and said, "Look, I need to get in touch with Mike Barnett. Can you give me a phone number?" And he's like, "My friend's at the airport. He's got a gun. He's going to shoot this passenger that's coming in." And so the guy goes, "Well, let me get your number back, and I'll call you back." So the person at the sheriff's department, excuse me, was trying to get in touch with Mike Burnett. He's on a flight coming home from California, so there was no way back in 1984 to get in touch with him. We didn't have cell phones, and so shortly after the shooting, that police officer or sheriff's deputy called my dad's friend back, called Stinky back, and said, "Hey, look, I can't get in touch with Mike Burnett." And my dad's friend, told the police officer, he said, "You're too late." He said, "I heard the shot." So he actually heard the shot over the phone before my dad hung up the phone. One of the
Yeah.
things that I want to highlight too
Yeah.
is if you look carefully, that wall where the blue starts, where the payphones start, that wall was indented about 4 feet. Okay, so when Bud and Jeff came around that corner, they're kind of looking off behind the camera because about 20, 30 people had gathered behind the camera to see who was coming. They, is it some superstar? And Mike Barnett, he was telling me that when he walked around the corner, he went out first looking. He didn't see anybody, so then he waves them on. Well, then and Jeff come around the corner, and see, you can see him looking behind the camera. So for in eyes are moving, indention, and when the lights came on, that's when my dad knew he was coming. So that's when he was looking through the corner of his sunglasses, and he could see him, and he knew when them lights became parallel, that's when he knew to turn around. So that's why his timing is so perfect.
Right.
It's because he actually worked as a cameraman for that news station.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. That is crazy. I never noticed that, and of course, I never knew your dad was a cameraman for the police station. I mean, for the news station. And so, of course, he would know like exactly what was going on. Um,
Yeah, I saw James Corville at an LSU football game, and he goes, "It's Channel 2. Me and him used to go drinking." So anyway, I just thought I'd share the James Corville story.
I love that. So when you were kidnapped and you were taken to California, um, did you notice any like mental deterioration of Jeff when you were with him in California?
Other than he didn't have a sex drive, he was worried about other things.
Right.
So whenever people go, how was it when he took you to California? I say it was better because I mean, he only did it a couple times on a trip. So whereas at home it was every day.
Yeah.
Where in California he had his mind on other things. But I mean, it happened a few times in the 10 days I was gone, but nothing like before we had gone. So I guess that was a plus.
I wonder what his end game was. Like, what did he think was going to happen? Was he going to harm you, or how was he? What was he thinking? I mean, do you have any idea of what his plan was?
I have no clue what his plan was. I mean, taking an 11-year-old boy on the bus to California with his parents without his parents'
Right.
permission, that's not a good start. He allowed me to call home collect. That's also not a good thing to do. Not to give advice to kidnappers, but don't let your subject call home collect. Which I guess they don't have that anymore. But
Right.
um, I think he realized he was in a no-win situation once we were running out of money. That's why I think he let me call collects. I think he was ready to get arrested, come back to Baton Rouge, and con and maneuver his way out of it, which I believe he thought he was going to do. But I know Mike Barnett um, was trying to make a case against Jeff to put him in jail for the rest of his life. And there was one moment in the tape phone conversations. I think they had like 9.5 hours of tape phone conversations between him and my mother. And he said, "If you ever want to see Jody alive again, you'll meet me in New York." And whenever he said that, that turned kidnapping into aggravated kidnapping, and aggravated kidnapping in Louisiana, 84 still might be, is mandatory life in prison. So Jeff was going to jail for the rest of his life. And people ask me, what I think about my dad doing, and I would have preferred Jeff go to jail for the rest of his life because we're all going to die. Jeff don't even know he's dead. Daddy let him off easy.
Yeah, they would have had a hand with him in prison for sure. You know how they treat child molesters in prison. And I don't think that it's any loss to the world that he was executed, but I do totally understand what you're saying. It would have been, I guess, I guess justice, but instead we got a poetic justice kind of situation there. Um, Whenever all this was going on, I did see that your uncle, whose name is also Jeff, he had did an interview when this was way past when all this happened. And he said he was really suspicious of Jeff. Is that something that you knew, that like your uncle was really suspicious of him, or was that just kept between him and your dad?
I knew my uncle didn't like Jeff because we had a tournament. We fought a karate tournament in Fort Worth, Texas, and my cousin Brad, who lived in Dallas, he came. That's Uncle Jeff's son. They lived in Dallas. he came to the karate tournament and he came and hung out with us that night. Well, Jeff, would always like, pop us on the back of the head, move, go forward. And I think Jeff popped Brad on the back of his head. Well, Brad didn't know Jeff. He wasn't, part of our group. And
Right.
he took offense to it. And he called my Uncle Jeff and said, "Can you come get me? This dude's an ass. Can I say a jerk? This guy's a jerk." And so my uncle was like, he's not going to hit my kid. So I just thought that his not liking Jeff stemmed from that incident. But whenever we got out of the car for him to drop us off is when he kissed me on the mouth. And I even, in 93, because remember, I wrote this in 93, I wrote exactly in 93 what my uncle says in that interview when he's like, "He kissed him on the mouth. I don't kiss my kid." I mean, I put it exactly that in '93 because he had expressed that to me, years later.
Yeah, in the interview, which we do feature the clip of the interview in our video that we posted back in October, if anyone wants to go and view that. But in the clip, he does say that, like you said, that Jeff kissed you on the lips. And I think that at that moment, I may have been beating someone's ass, but, he obviously thought something was weird. Do you think that he would have been someone that you could have confided in that you were being abused? Or why did you keep it a secret? Which I'm definitely not blaming you for it because I think as a child, you don't want to cause a problem. But why did you keep it a secret?
Because I knew my dad would kill him.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to upset adults. I figured it eventually would have ended. I knew that. And I figured it was just, if I just keep quiet, deal with it, it's going to stop. And I just didn't want to upset my parents, basically.
So is that something when you talk to people, when you talk to advocates and things like that, is that something that's really common with children that they try to keep that to themselves and keep it a secret?
Well, yeah, I mean, because most of people who abuse children are known to that child, and it's usually
Right.
someone that they love and care. And so that's what keeps them quiet because they don't want this person to go to jail. I did an interview. I think it was 2006, maybe, for ABC News, and they had a case. It was here in Louisiana, and they were in front of the Supreme Court, and it was a non-death. It was a non-homicide. It was for child rape. They had this guy on death row in Louisiana, and they were fighting it, saying that we don't kill people who don't kill people. Um, so I did my interview, and one of my points was, if they keep it that way, if they start putting child molesters and pedophiles to death, what's going to happen is the kid, if they tell, and then Uncle Paul goes to jail, and then he's killed in a death penalty, well, that kid is going to have that burden of, if I would have never said nothing, Uncle Paul wouldn't have been put to death. Because a lot of times they care about their uncle. So, and you're going to end up with, and my friend who's a lawyer, he disagrees with this, but I think you'd end up with more dead kids because if there's not a witness to testify, then they get away with it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I definitely don't ever want to say like that you did anything wrong because I don't think you did. And I think it was just you being a child and that's just your nature. But I do want to say that Jeff was a professional manipulator and he groomed your entire family like we talked about, and he built trust with you, built trust with your family. He came to dinner at your house and things like that. And so this was a person that you had a positive relationship with outside of the abuse. So everything else was positive except for the abuse, right?
Right. And going back to not saying anything, I did an interview. I forget. But anyway, so the guy asked me. He goes, "What advice would you give your 10, 11-year-old self?" I said, "You really want to know the truth?" I said, "Be quiet. Your dad's not going to jail, and you're going to write a hell of a book one day." And I don't think that's what he was expecting. but
I love that.
but that's what I was saying.
Yeah, I love that. So I don't know if you noticed this, but in the video of the news stream that happened when your dad shot Jeff, they didn't administer any type of like life-saving measures or anything. They just kind of looked at him on the ground like, "Oh, damn." Do you think
Well,
that?
if you see the whole video, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
If you watch unedited version, it's on my website. If you go to it, it's graphic. Be warned. I mean, you see blood they go secure daddy. They neutralize the threat, which actually after daddy shot Jeffy, what a threat. But to them, they neutralize. So they get the gun from my dad. Bud goes over to Jeff, sees that he's bleeding profusely, and the next thing Bud does is he holds up his badge and he says, "I'm with the sheriff's department. Call an ambulance. Someone call an ambulance." So I mean, the ambulance I think was there like in 2.5 minutes. So I mean, they didn't at that point, I guess, do mouth to mouth or chest compressions, but I mean, Jesus could have been there and that would have saved him.
That's right. That's totally right. And I'm surprised that he was in a coma for a whole day and that he even lasted that long, honestly, because, like I said, it was a damn good shot. But, after all of this happened and your dad was out of jail, and which he wasn't in for very long, but, and all of this kind of blew over, were you relieved or were you kind of on edge because it was so publicized?
You know what? I didn't really even think about it. I just went back to being a sixth grader. I went back to playing sports, and I just went about my life regularly. Like I said, me and Daddy, and my older brother, we'd go to the Saints game. I remember that particular, like '85. We went and saw the Oilers, the Rams, and the Giants play the Saints. One was a preseason game. So I mean, we just kind of got back life to normal.
Yeah.
He moved back in. My parents got back together because they were separated at the time, and it wasn't something that we gave two thoughts about. And unless Geraldo ran a special my junior year in high school where he interviewed Charles Manson, and they showed the clip of Daddy, and then actually I checked my Twitter today, and a guy had sent that clip to me in my message board. And the funny thing about that clip is at the same time that was going on, the guy was in Texas writing the book Friday Night Lights, and there's a passage in the book Friday Night Lights that says the teacher gave no instruction than to applaud a man who shot and killed a suspect who had molested his son. So I mean, they even mentioned that clip of Daddy in that book Friday Night Lights. So other than the moments like that, or I'm in Pennsylvania, Bowling for Columbine comes out, and there's Daddy, or Traces of Death Part 2 comes out, there's Daddy. But for the most part, we just got back to normal.
That is wonderful to hear, and I think that's really the best possible case scenario that could have happened. Um, so after all this was over, your parents got back together. Your dad had a drinking problem. Did he get over that after all of this, and your parents got back together, and every life went back to normal? Did he get over that?
Yes and no. All right. So whenever he was on probation, he wasn't allowed to drink. We'd go out and we'd find a bottle in the grill. There'd be a bottle of vodka in the grill. When he was community service, he's drinking vodka on the tractor. But he wasn't abusing it as much then. He wasn't going to drink it all day. I mean, he would have sips here and there. But I'll never forget, after he got off probation, my mother came to me and she said, "I got to talk to you." I said, "What?" She goes, "I think your daddy's drinking." And I said, "Why?" She goes, "Because he only snores when he's drunk, and he hasn't snored in 5 years, and he's been snoring the last 2 nights." So once he got off of probation, he started drinking again, and eventually she left him again for the same reason. But I mentioned a time, probably '06, I think like beginning of '06. He has what's called esophageal varices, which is caused by drinking. And most people don't survive it. He did. He quit drinking for a couple years after that. And then, of course, he went in the nursing home. He wasn't abusing alcohol, but my sister would take him to get a margarita. My mom, we bring him home every Sunday, and he wanted a beer. And my mother was like, "Can you have one of your beers?" I'm like, "Yeah, get him a beer. What's he gonna do? Ruin his future?" And so, Daddy took that beer and he chugs it right, and he goes, "Oh," and he wanted another one. So my mother goes and gets him another one. And he chugs that one. He's like, "Oh." And my mother's like, "No, dear, you've had enough. I'm gonna get you a tea." So she poured him some tea. So I just walked over to the freezer, got my bottle of vodka, walked over to him, started pouring some vodka into that tea, and he just had the biggest smile on his face. So he still enjoyed his libations, but he wasn't as abusive towards the substance that he was when he was younger because he couldn't.
Yeah. Well, that is. I'm glad that he wasn't. He didn't sink down that hole because it is a very dark disease, and I know that all the incidents that happened with your parents separating and then the abuse and everything happening to you. He was obviously struggling at the time. And I think it's really hard, obviously, to get through something like that. And people look for something to just kind of lighten the load for themselves. And when people turn to, alcohol and things like that, it can, it can alter your whole life. But it does seem like your dad lived, a good full life, and he had you and your siblings and his wife, and y'all seem like just a normal, regular family.
We're pretty normal. I mean, my sister's got a daughter. She teaches dance. My other son, he's got a couple of daughters and a son. My nephew, he's a good kid. He's smart. They're active. One's got they rent a horse that she goes riding, goes to the skate park. I mean, so we're pretty much normal as anybody could be with teenage kids in this TikTok age.
Right. Right. Imagine if something like what happened back then in 1983 happened today. It would have been more than 20,000 people watching that video. And like I said, I think 20 million people had viewed the video when I last checked. But and that's just on the one platform that I looked, and the video's everywhere. But yeah,
go on TikTok and type in my dad's name and see how many people got videos talking about my dad. It's crazy.
Right, right. Yeah, this story. If I could have done it the first story that we did, I would have done it. But I wanted to kind of get started a little bit before I did that story because it is my favorite one I've ever done. It was the only one I had a special shirt for, and I guess my biggest question now is, what did you think about my shirt in that video?
Was it? I don't remember what it was. I may have listened to it. What was it? The daddy shirt with the revenge or whatever?
No, it said shoot your local pedophile.
Okay. So my dad. So my sister's got a couple versions. Let me see if I can pull it up because they got a picture of my dad on a T-shirt, and it says like revenge or something.
I love that.
Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. Images. All right. I'm gonna hold. Can you see me?
You're frozen on my screen, but I know that everyone else can see it. I'm sure.
Oh, hold on. You know what? I can text it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can text it to you right now. All right. So anyway, all right, here we go. Tell me. So my sister bought a couple of those. I came across it, and people were like, "Well, you should sue." I'm like, "Sue someone who's trying to raise money for the Wounded Warrior Project? I don't think so.
Right.
I'm not going to sell daddy shirts. But if someone can make a buck to help Wounded Warriors, my dad would want it."
Okay. I have seen that shirt before, and I almost bought it myself. I love that. I think that's epic. It's epic. My dad doesn't have a shirt, so pretty freaking cool.
Right, a friend of mine, she used to come over every Sunday night to watch the Highlander. Then we watch Star Trek New Generation and then the Highlander. So it was a two-for. My friend John, the one that I mentioned that was a lawyer, he would come over, and another friend of mine, Jimmy, would come over. My little brother would be all of us here, and we watched that with Daddy. And she went on a trip to Boston, and she went to Fenway Park. I think it was this past summer, and she took Daddy to Fenway Park. She wore that shirt to the Red Sox game. So I thought that was kind of cool.
I love that. I will tell you, every time I do wear my shoot your local pedophile shirt, people constantly stop me and tell me, "Oh, I love your shirt. I bet you're such a good mother," and things like that. And everyone loves it. I'm gonna have to get that shirt that you sent me that we're gonna post a picture of over here, and see the reaction I get, because I think I love that. I think that's awesome. But
All right, my friends that I'm working for,
Mhm.
my friends that I'm working for, so they opened up it's called Chris's Specialty Foods. It's in Frisco, Texas, and so I went up there last year to bowl crawfish because the manager, he was taking a weekend off to go hunt or whatever, so they sent me up there to go bowl some crawfish, and I was at Knockouts right there off 121 in is it the Colony, somewhere in that area, and
Yeah.
so I was sitting there talking to the bartender, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm from Philadelphia." I'm like, "Well, I used to live up there." So I was like, "You know what?" I said, "Let me get you a copy of my book." I was like, "You'll be able to read it." I said, "You like reading?" She said, "I love reading." I said, "I'm gonna get you a copy of my book." I was like, and I'll name some places and they'll be familiar, and it just kind of makes the book a little better. And so I went out to the car, I got a book, I gave it to her, and she's like, "What's it about?" I said, "Well, just it's easier if you just read the back." And so she took the book, she starts reading the back, and she's like, "Oh my god!" So she walks over to the other bartender, and she shows the other bartender the back of the book. Well, that other bartender starts reading the back of the book, and she looks at me and she goes, "Do you know Mr. Stevens?" I'm like, "Mr. Stevens?" She goes, "Mr. Stevens, he comes in, he's a regular. He just showed me the video of this like 2 days ago." So I mean, it's still something people are talking.
It is. It is. I mean, definitely it is. And I mean, even whenever I started talking about this, my family, who's older than me, because I wasn't born in 1983 yet, sadly, but my family was like, "Oh yeah, we remember that. Oh yeah, we remember that." They, it's that's part of American history now. Your dad is now a folk legend. You know, your story, it won't ever disappear.
I just wish like I could get on Good Morning America or something to promote the book because when COVID happened, no one was. I wasn't able to promote it. So I haven't done a national show. I mean, I've been on Oprah. I've been on Montel Williams twice. I've been on Lisa Gibbons show. I've been on ESPN, and that was all. I had nothing to promote. Now, once my book came out, COVID happened, and I haven't been able to, go out and promote my book like I
Right.
want to. So, too bad Ellen's off the air. Maybe Tamron Hall. I think that would be a good show for me to go on. But and I got a friend of mine. He works for Good Morning America. He works for Good Morning America, and I still haven't been able to do that show. I'm seeing all kind of other people get their books on there, but not mine.
I'm going to say a prayer every night that you can get your book on Good Morning America. I think that now that things, I don't want to say are
Wait,
back.
wait, wait. Can you make it Joe Rogan?
I will, yes, I will. I will pray that you can get on Joe Rogan. But I think that now that things are becoming like more normalized, hopefully you can get out there and promote your book because I think that it's really worth the read. Because this is just a very interesting story. And I mean, it's been really interesting talking to you. Honestly, I was super nervous to do this video because I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to like say the wrong thing or anything, but you are so just open about what happened to you and just a very positive person. And I think that this has been wonderful to talk to you. It's like I dreamed about it last night. Like, don't screw it up, Tiffany. But it's been awesome talking to you. So I really appreciate you coming and doing this with us. And I like I said, the link for this book, Why Gary Why, is going to be in the description of this video, and it's in the description of the video that we posted it on.
So let me ask you this question: Did you read the whole book in the end?
I did not read the whole book. I will say that. I'm so sorry. I did
Okay.
not have time to read the
No, no, it's okay. All right. So back this summer, I was working at a friend of mine's fireworks stand. And I don't know if you've ever worked a fireworks stand, but in Louisiana, it's like a tent out in the field. And so they got to have somebody stay in the camper next to the fireworks stand so people don't steal it. You put security cameras up, motion sensors, but you still got to have someone there to call the cops if someone busts in. And so me and him were talking, and he's a local musician around town, and he does voiceover acting, and he does this, that, and the other, and he has a studio in his house. Well, me and him made an agreement, and we did the book audiobook, so it's also available on Audible. If and I'm going to send you a free promo code so you can listen to from the beginning to the end,
of that.
and because there's a lot of good information, especially if you got kids. If you're a parent, it should be sold at like hospitals where babies are born.
Right.
It should be what to expect when expecting, and then why Gary why. I mean, that's how important of a book this is.
I 100% agree. I mean, maybe it's because I'm a girl raised in the South, but I 100% agree. I have greatly appreciated everything that you have told me. It has really answered a lot of my very pressing questions. And I know it's just about dinner time, so I'm going to try to wrap it up so you can go and take care of what you need to take care of. But we really appreciate you coming on our show today. It has been just really a gift to us.
I appreciate you having me. I appreciate you doing the story because I was like, hey, y'all could have contacted me. I'd come on the show.
Yeah, when I saw your comment, I almost died. I literally was like hyperventilating. And of course,
Well,
Brian,
keep up
is
the
this
good
the real
work.
Jody?
I get that a lot too, but yeah, pretty much, it's me.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Next time you're in the DFW area, please let me know. And I will,
I will.
yes, please do. I would love to chat with you, not about your story, but just about life in general. So definitely get in contact with me. And I hope you have a great evening. And I hope everyone enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed doing it. But do you have any closing comments?
Nope. Just you know what? If you go through something bad like being abused sexually, it's a process. It takes work, but it's not a death sentence. You're not scored for life, and with the proper support, you can be okay.
Thank you so much for that. I 100% agree with that. And I think that I hope that everyone has access to the proper support if they have gone through something like this. But thank you so much. Everyone, buy that book, Why Gary Why by Jody Plauché. It's on Amazon. And I am sure you can also check it out, check out his website and see anything else that we might not have talked about. It's probably on there. But thank you so much, Jody. I really appreciate you being on our show. But that is it for us tonight on Drinks and Discussions True Crime.
To have you, and we are going to be having some drinks together tonight. I am drinking, this is called Orange Mimosa. It is not it doesn't have like a brand. It's from Aldi. And if you have an Aldi that has wine, I highly recommend checking it out because I have not had anything yet that I didn't like from there, and it's super inexpensive. So that's what I'm drinking tonight is mimosa from Aldi. It is not bubbly. I just wanted to say that it is just orange juice and wine pretty much together. So it's healthy. What are you drinking, Brian?
Mimosas aren't just for Sunday morning brunch anymore.
Well, somebody could be watching this on Sunday morning.
That is true. And no one told them when we were actually recording this. So you don't know. It could be Sunday morning.
Exactly.
Okay. So what I'm going to be drinking for my Sunday brunch is Jefferson's bourbon. And it's funny because at the back of the bottle, I don't know if you can see that very clearly or not, it's got a picture of Jefferson on the back.
PJ on there.
Yeah, so it's it's actually a pretty it's mid grade for me. 40% alcohol volume, so it's right in that little happy medium place I like to stay in sometimes. But I would recommend it. So cheers.
Well, awesome. Cheers.
To a great show.
Well, let's get into it. So today we are talking about Gary Plauché. He is from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Gary had 4 children, and he was married, but he was separated from his wife, June. His youngest child, Jody, he was into sports. He did karate, was one of the things that he did. And he started going to a dojo where there was an instructor named Jeff Doucet. He was born in Port Arthur, Texas. So, that's kind of local to us. But,
when I saw this story, when we started doing some research on this story, I was wondering to myself, as we get into this, did you know or did you find out who's responsible for actually putting the son in karate class? Was that part of, some of the disagreements between their marriage? Because maybe mom didn't want him in karate or something like that. I don't know. I wonder if that kind of had something to play into, what happened in that marriage.
I'm not quite sure who put him in the karate class, but I know that they had a relationship with Jeff. He was somebody who needed help, and they kind of gave him handouts times. I mean, Jeff was living in the dojo. He lived in the karate school.
Oh, yeah.
So he wasn't he didn't have any family, no friends. So he did kind of connect with Jeff as a family friend. But I do think that was textbook pedophile of Jeff to kind of groom their family for that. And I know that when the crime actually happened, when he was arrested, he took Jody from his mother's house.
That
So
trust factor. He had a little trust built in there, and
yeah,
you
he
know,
had definitely manipulated them.
crimes of convenience. It was a convenient target. And I know we're going to get into more of the details, but from the outset, it just looks as if, you know, hindsight's 2020. You kind of let this guy get a little too close to your family, probably even too soon. Because I
Yeah.
wouldn't let somebody that I was giving handouts really get that close to me and my family. I'd keep them at arm's
Oh
length,
yeah,
I would think.
definitely. People say if somebody wants to spend more time with your children than you do, then there's probably a problem.
Probably
So
suspect.
I,
Yep.
so that's a red flag for sure. But Jeff, he was born in 1959, Port Arthur, Texas, and he claims that he was molested as a child, and he started molesting other children to the point where he couldn't remember. Like he had no idea how many kids he'd actually molested.
Wow.
So and he was actually charged for this crime, but it was erased from his criminal record. So I didn't see how it was erased, like how he got a child molestation erased from his record. I don't know, mystery to me. But he moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana when he was 24 years old and decided to become a karate instructor. So that's where he met Jody Plauché in 1983. So
I'm gonna look up something as you continue to talk because I wanted to, because when you're speaking, I wanted to know, and maybe even some of the viewers when they see this, I'll know off the top of their head. But when did the legislation pass where you had to register as a sex offender, a sex
oh, that
offender?
would be interesting to know. I'm not sure when. I feel like that was in the 90s. So maybe this was before that. Let me
Yeah,
know.
that's what I'm thinking.
Um,
Uh,
but Jeff was living in the dojo. Like I told you, he had no friends, no family. But students really, really liked him. I think they liked him because he took them out, took them skating. He would take them to the movies. He would take them on karate trips, and he was their like father figure, authoritative figure. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like karate, but
mm-hmm.
obvi- obviously, like you do sports, so I'm sure you are. I don't know what I'm.
Like,
Yeah, but like people like karate instructors, like senseis, they're like a highly regarded person. Like people respect them, and I think that Jeff kind of had this position that he had developed for himself where children respected him.
hmm
And I think that was kind of his ploy. Like he planned it.
hmm
That was his way to get into be with children and be in people's homes. You know?
I was doing some research and I just found out too, I looked it up as you were speaking there, that the federal sex offender registration and notification, there was nothing prior to 1994. And then beginning with the Jacob Wetterling Act in 1994, Congress started to address the issue and started passing bills for sex offender registration and all, and it kind of starts evolving from 1996 to 2003.
Yeah, so this
So
predates that.
predates
So
that, yes. So that's
yeah.
why he probably could get it expunged or erased from your record. But back to what you were saying, you know, it just bothers me to no end when I hear these types of cases or crimes where, it takes someone who is a youth and an adult abuses the trust that that youth have or has in that individual. Teachers have done it. Um, Pastors, preachers, priests, people under the cloth have done it. And it seems to be the common denominator when these cases come up is that someone gained the trust of someone in a vulnerable situation or an adolescent and they abuse that trust and this transpires. And it just bothers me. I mean I really hated this story, researching this story and just being a father and you as a mother, when you see and hear crimes that are against children, it just infuriates me.
Crimes against children and animals are some of the things I literally have. Like, I cannot watch a video of something or listen to an audio of something, or like it's deeply disturbing to me.
hmm
And I'm really glad that Jody did come out of the situation in the way that he did. But it's really tragic for somebody like this guy molested countless children before he was caught. So we don't even know how many children whose like lives are affected by this man, and we will never know.
We never know.
Because even he didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
But the parents liked him. They liked him enough to say, hey, come to dinner at our house. And that was kind of the way that he got in with the Plauché family. Was he started coming to dinner at their house. He started taking them on errands. He started basically spending time with them in a way where it was a manipulative tactic, 100% a manipulative tactic that he was using to get closer and closer to the family and groom the entire family. And also with his parents divided, I know that in a home where there's not two parents there, that it's children are at a higher risk just immediately with only one adult present, because that's half the amount of supervision that they're getting. So he had the perfect target in this family.
Yep.
But I guess unlucky for him, they did eventually catch him. In March 1983, that's when Jody started being molested. And even when they went on karate trips, Jeff would have Jody sleep in bed with him. And it escalated to him abusing him daily, sometimes 2 times a day. And that went on for months until in February of 1984, Jeff got in trouble for hot checks. That's really what he ended up getting in trouble for that set him off. I don't know if it was a mental thing or what, but he kidnapped Jody and he told his mom, hey, I'm going to take him to California. We're going to go to Disneyland or whatever. And took him and kidnapped him.
So let me ask you this question. And again, knock on wood, I have never met anyone, nor have I experienced this type of a situation. But it would just, as a father who, and you know me, I'm a helicopter parent with my son, that he's not too far he's not out of my vision, but he's not too far from my arm's length as a 4-year-old. I keep him where, I'm kind of overprotective. I don't say overprotective, I just say I'm protective. But wouldn't you think, let me just say this, I think that if something like this happened to my son, I would see behavioral patterns. I would see things as an attentive parent, something going on at the outset of this type of behavior. I don't think, but again, it's never happened. So, maybe I wouldn't, maybe you just don't know. But I would think that something in the back of my mind would actually say, hey, something's not right. He kind of seems a little bit different around this karate instructor. I need to look into.
Neither of Jody's parents caught on to anything. I mean, he went to his mother's home and said, hey, I'm going to take him. And they were surprised that they were gone so long. I mean, they were like, oh, shouldn't he be back by then? But Jody's uncle, that's Gary's brother, he had said many times, there's something going on. There's something wrong here. And Gary was like, no, everything is fine. Like, you've totally got this guy wrong. He's not a bad guy. He's doing wonderful things for the children or whatever. But Gary's brother said, there's something wrong with this guy. So someone did see it. I mean, there had to have been something, like you're saying, because someone did say something is wrong here. This is not right. Why is he upset that he doesn't get to spend the night with your son? Isn't that strange?
It's strange.
They didn't want Jody to stay over the weekend in my house. Jeff got out of the car. Didn't speak to anybody. He was upset that Jody was staying. And he kissed him back in the mouth. I told Gary, something's not right with this relationship. Gary stood by Jeff. And I told Gary, you're wrong. Something's not right. I don't even kiss my kids in the mouth.
So yeah, I do think that there are definitely signs.
What karate instructor provides Uber service? I don't understand either. Why would you allow your instructor to come and pick up your child?
Yeah. I think that he had gradually got them used to doing things here, doing things there, and it was a gradual build-up over time.
Mm-hmm.
Even to the point where Jody had said, like, I didn't realize it until one day he went further and further and further. And I thought, it doesn't seem right. What is he doing? But of course, they don't go all the way the first time. They make you a little bit uncomfortable and they test your boundaries. That is like a textbook pedophile thing that people do. They test the boundaries and see how far that they can push it without actually doing something wrong, until eventually they do whatever their intentions are. But
It's sad. It's sad and sickening.
It's very sad. And Jeff was going to trial for bad checks. He abducted Jody. He went through 3 different states before he got to Anaheim, California, and he even stopped at his own mother's house. And everywhere he went, he said, "Oh, this is my son." He dyed Jody's hair black, and he shaved his beard so that they wouldn't be recognizable. And he took him, and they did go to Disneyland. He really did take him to Disneyland. But in the meantime, he was molesting him and sexually abusing him in the hotel the whole time that he was missing.
You know what's so weird? You know what's funny about that is we both are parents to young children. You couldn't even try to do some of this stuff to my son at 4 years old without him going, "This isn't right. I don't know about all this." To have an 11-year-old let someone dye their hair, and I'm not victim-splaining here. I'm not blaming the victim.
Yeah, no, it is shocking.
It's hard for me to understand how an 11-year-old, even in that time period, would be so trusting or so naive to allow this jackass, for a better term, to do these types of things. It's just mind-blowing to me.
It is shocking, and you would think that a child would say something, but Jody was a really good kid, and he did. Someone else has asked him this question before, and he said that he didn't want Jeff to get in trouble because even though he knew that Jeff was doing bad things, he did like him, and so he didn't want him to get in trouble. And he also didn't want his parents to be upset. They had enough problems going on as it was, and he didn't want to cause another problem for them. So it's just really, I think, a child not really understanding the gravity of what's happening, but knowing that something bad is happening.
Right.
But obviously he did not say anything for whatever reason it was.
He thought he was saving his parents from things. He thought he was saving the kidnapper from things, and he thought of him just being in the middle was going to make everybody else happy, and he wasn't worried about his own self.
Exactly. I mean, children, I think that you know this. Kids do stuff all the time that seem like, are you trying to get yourself killed?
Right.
And they have no sense of self-preservation, I don't think.
Right,
so I think he was definitely thinking about everyone else and not thinking about himself at all. But while he was being kidnapped in Anaheim, California, Jeff, for whatever reason it was, he allowed Jody to continue calling his mom. And that is how they ended up finding him. The FBI traced one of his calls. That was on February 29th. They were able to trace one of the calls to his mother. So that is how they ended up finding where he was at. And they immediately found Jody. They immediately found him. They brought him back home. We actually have a picture of him reuniting with his family. And at this time, his parents had no idea about all the sexual abuse. At this time, all they knew was his karate instructor kidnapped him, and they got him back. He was unharmed from the looks of it.
Do we know if this was the first and only call that he was able to make home, or was there
multiple calls?
There were multiple calls. Wow.
He had made multiple calls, and he was doing it from payphones. So at some time, the FBI decided to track the phone call. And also, whenever the FBI is tracking phone calls, they have to be a certain length. Like if it's just a, "Hey, how are you?" and then they hang up, they don't have enough time to trace the phone call. So it may have taken several times for them to actually find out where he was. And then again, it was a payphone. It wasn't an actual place that he was at. So but they found him rather quickly.
But you think about this too. There was no cell phones back then. We weren't living in a digital age or all analog lines. And the time and effort it would actually, like you said, you have to be on a phone call for a certain long amount of time before they'll be able to trace it back then. Um, I'm surprised, pleasantly
Yeah.
so, that they found them so quickly, because back then I don't think that that was as easy a task as they can do today. But it's
Oh
also,
yeah, definitely.
but it also reminds me of, like, was he just getting sloppy at this point to allow him to do that? Is that why, he eventually ended up catching him, like, being caught, because, he wasn't really thinking it through, even though he was trying to pacify the mom, or, make sure that he knew that he was safe.
Yeah. Yeah, though definitely people had said that at this time his mental stability was gradually deteriorating.
Hmm.
Over time, he was getting sloppy because I think he was losing his mind. I
Hmm.
mean, he kidnapped a little boy and ran off to Anaheim, California. That's crazy as it is.
Right.
But over the time that it happened, he continued to molest the boy, and it didn't get any better. His mental state didn't get any better. And he was finally arrested, and he was charged with aggravated kidnapping. Like I said, at this time, they had no idea what he had actually done. And Jody actually has never really disclosed the actual details of it because he says it doesn't matter.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but this is where there's I think there's two types of people in the world. There's the superhero type of people, and then there's the vigilante justice type of people. And this is where people become undecided on who's a criminal. So I'm sure this is what, like, superheroes, they say, okay, like Spider-Man, my aunt is dead, but revenge, there's no reason to seek revenge. It would be in like the Marvel world, villains are the ones who are the vengeful people. You know what I'm saying? Um, but in, like, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Princess Bride. It's one of my favorite movies. At the end, Inigo Montoya, he stabs the count and he says, "I want my dad back, you son of a bitch." That is a type of, there's anti-revenge and then there's the pro-revenge. I love that. I love the pro-revenge, and that's definitely what Gary did. He was out having some drinks at the Cotton Club, and there was just happened to be a local news executive having drinks at the bar. He's talking to the bartender. He's like, "Yeah, that pedo, Jeff Doucet, he's going to be coming in at 9:08 p.m." Gary
Hmm.
hears this immediately. He's like, "Bye. I'm going to leave the bar." He tucked his 38 caliber gun into his boot, and he went off to the airport. What airport is it? It's Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport in Baton Rouge.
Hmm.
So I, I know that you were alive. I wasn't alive when this happened, but I know you were. How old were you when this happened? Were you old enough to remember something was happening?
I was 12.
12.
But so let me tell you from what I remember. I don't remember this story. This story was right around the time kidnappings of children was kind of prevalent. And I believe the only one I remember, and I think it happened similar or around or even earlier than this, was Adam. Adam was kidnapped,
Oh
and they
yeah,
found it.
Adam Walsh.
Yeah, Adam Walsh, and that one I remember, but I don't know if it happened before or right around the same time. But it seems like it was right around the same time period that that happened. So I think this one wasn't, other than the actual what you're going to get into next. When that happened, I think maybe it was out in the open, but I just don't recall. I don't remember this story.
I mean, that's a good point that you were going to say about just the crime in the 90s. That was a very high crime in the late 80s and early 90s, very high crime time in the USA. And I think that it was a general fear for parents that a kidnapper could be on any corner because, like you had said previously, people didn't have cell phones. They couldn't just track you and see where you were at. Even on my car now, someone could just log into my car's computer and see anywhere that I've driven.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't
Mm-hmm.
do that back then. So
Right.
definitely, I think people were afraid that something like this would happen to their families. And March 16th, Jeff was extradited to Louisiana. He came in at 9:30 p.m. at the airport. WBRZ news station was broadcasting this everywhere in Baton Rouge.
Mm-hmm.
Even you're 12 years old, I'm sure some 12-year-old kids were watching the news that night. They were broadcasting, and they wanted to see the first moments that Jeff, got off that airplane into Baton Rouge, because this was obviously a national case. This guy was tracked all the way across the country, and this little boy was found. It was like the holy grail of cases at the time. And actually, so I spoke to someone who their father had been on the phone with Gary when Gary arrived at the airport. He called a few of his friends, and a couple of them, he spoke to them, and he didn't tell them like what he was doing. He just, it was just like small talk with them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Gary did this because he was undercover. He had on glasses, he had on baseball cap, he's standing at the payphones, just trying to act natural. So he's calling a few friends. He finally calls one friend and he says, "You're about to hear a shot. Here he comes." And that's when Jeff Doucet was being escorted like through the airport by Sheriff Deputy Mike Barrett. So we have a cop holding a handcuffed man walking through the airport. We're going to show you the video. We're not going to show you the graphic portion of it, but check out the video here. As soon as they walk past Gary, I mean, it is like you couldn't have done it any more smooth. Gary flips around and he shoots Jeff 3 feet away from him, directly in his right side of his head. And honestly, I think it was a pretty damn good shot because he was inches away from the sheriff's deputy. And of course, as soon as it happened, the sheriff's deputy turned around and he saw him. He's telling people, call the sheriff's department, call 911, and he's holding Gary to restrain him, but he does it almost as an embrace. I don't mean like a thank you for shooting this guy embrace, but I mean like oh my God, I'm so sorry that you've been driven to this point kind of embrace. And he just holds Gary. And he says, "Why, Gary? Why'd you do it?"
Mm-hmm.
And that's like that's like the phrase. You can hear it on the video if you find it online, the uncensored version. But that's like the phrase that's
Which makes me
can't think of associated with this.
Somebody call the sheriff's office. Call ambulance. Call ambulance, Dad. Call EMS. Why did you got to do that? Sheriff's office. Hey, you can go in the car. I appreciate that. Bye-bye. I'm going to shoot you? We are. Take off? No. Everybody stay right back, please. Good luck to you. Thank you, sir. Somebody do it. Yeah, you can do it too. Yeah, so
think that they recognized him? I mean, because I know you had mentioned that he was in glasses and a hat and kind of like incognito, but from the quote here, Gary, why Gary, from the police officer, they had to have known that that was the guy.
I think as soon as he turned around, Gary, he looked, he definitely had it was, he didn't look like, he didn't like blend in with the crowd, but he was facing away from them. But I think as soon as he turned around, that they knew it was him.
You know, and I'm kind of, so the close, almost point blank shot, I'm glad to a certain degree that he took that approach, because I'm not sure if he was a skilled marksman with that handgun, but imagine trying to fire it from far away and then missing the mark, shooting an officer and or someone else, an innocent bystander, a reporter. I know you're going to get into more, but when I read that part of it, that's the first thing that came to my mind is he made sure that he got close enough to only inflict harm on the intended person he wanted to inflict harm upon.
Yeah, and I think that that's why the result of his case actually happened after he shot him. That Gary, he was arrested. Jeff was taken to the hospital. He was in a coma for a day. 24 hours later, he passed away. Obviously, he did not make it. And I don't know. Jeff's brother said that justice was not served, and I don't know, but Gary says he'd do it again. So as a parent, I think that there's obviously in the law, there's not a blurred line because the law is the law. But as a parent, it's almost hard to see right from wrong in the case, because I feel like what he did wasn't wrong. I mean, that's just me, but I think he's right. If it was your kid, you would do it.
We all say that. We all say, and it's funny because you are a mother, a wife, a female. I am a father, a husband, and a male. And I have said this, and it just came out on somebody posted something similar to this all the time, is that I don't protect my wife because she is a female and a weaker person. I protect my wife because she's valuable to me, and I protect things of value to me.
Yeah.
I tell
yeah,
people,
exactly.
I tell people all the time. And when you're talking to your people and you're saying, "Oh man, I killed somebody. They did that to my family. I killed that dude if he did that to my wife or my son or something like that." So when this guy did it, and I'm reading about it, would we all have the guts to really actually act upon something like that? I really don't
have
know.
The opportunity.
I don't know if I would really be able to pull the trigger and take snuff out someone else's life. Deservedly so. I'm not saying that this guy was wrong. I just don't know if I would be able to actually do it. But I haven't been in that situation, and you don't know what kind of mental state you're in if that actually happened to your child. So
definitely, and that is why he did undergo psychological evaluation. He was taken to trial for the murder, and he was found that there was no wrongdoing because he was temporarily insane at the time that it happened. But like you said, honestly, something like this wouldn't be able to happen today. There's no way you can walk into an airport and go sit at a payphone and wait for somebody to walk out. I mean, somebody would recognize you.
mm-hmm.
There's so much security. I think it was a little bit easier for him to do it back then. And do I think I'm capable of doing it? I don't know. Like you said, you never know what's going to happen to you until you're in that situation. Right. And even like in a more recent case in 2012, there was a man in Hidalgo, Texas, and he actually walked up upon a man molesting his 5-year-old daughter on his property. And he beat the man.
Yeah, beat him to death.
To the point. Yeah, he beat him to death. And he called the police and said, "This man is about to die on me. Please help me. I just killed this guy." I think that he didn't intend on killing the guy, but the rage at the moment. And I think that, it's the same with Gary. He had to process all of this rage because this had been going on right under his nose for months and months and months, and he just finds out about it. I think that he said on a on an interview that he felt helpless, and this is what he felt like he had to do.
It's funny too. Not funny, but from a streaming channel called Drinks and Discussions, that the point that he was actually drinking before he went out and did this too. I'm sure alcohol played a little bit of a factor on his plan to do something that, if he had been of clear mind, he probably would have thought through it a little better. But the impulse, the allegations, all of that coupled with everything else that was going on in his life, I think he had just gotten to a point where he had a mental breakdown to a certain degree. And we talk about mental health now in this day and age. I think that's one aspect of life that trauma, not necessarily physical trauma, but emotional trauma, can still trigger mental episodes that you may not know or may not expect the desired action in what you actually are getting from a person, where otherwise they are completely sane and normal.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that Jody wrote a book about this afterwards, and as an adult, he wrote a book, and he said in his book, I don't think what he did was right, but when someone is that bad of a person, you just don't really care about it. So I think that that's, I don't know. I don't think it was a loss to the world, but I don't know. Do you know that Gary had developed kind of a drinking problem during all this stuff going on? And I'm sure that definitely did have something to do with it. But I think that he also, just in general, I don't think he knew how to deal with the situation as it was. And I'm sure the alcohol did not help.
Did you ever find anything? Have you read anything? And I didn't have the time to actually, because as we're talking, more questions start to arise. Do you know whatever happened to the mother? Did the mother ever say anything about, all of these allegations for one, and then the actual shooting of the actual molester?
So she did stay mostly out of the spotlight. I will say that her and Gary did get back together and they stayed married for the remainder of their lives. But she did ask Jody when he wrote his book, why don't you tell people what happened to you? And Jody told her that he doesn't want to, number one, trigger people who have also been victims, because he's now a victim advocate. That's his job, as he goes around talking with victims, helping them, and doing like speeches to just in general for the victims of like molestation and other things, abuse, whatever. But his mom asked him, why didn't you put the stuff in there? And the second reason was because he didn't want pedophiles to like get off on it. So that's the only thing that I really read about his mother's input in the whole case, was she had thought that he should have put more information about the actual abuse in his book, but he disagreed with that. But I do think that Gary, even when he became well and his life was to normal, I guess, he still never said that he would have gone back on shooting Jeff. He always said, if you could dig him up, I'd shoot him again.
Absolutely.
So I just think that he just didn't regret it. He had no regrets at all. And I think that's kind of what pisses some people off, is you took someone's life and you don't regret it. But in my personal opinion, I don't think that it was much of a loss to humanity. Jeff seemed like a bit of a waste of skin. So.
What was going through your mind when you were on that phone at the airport waiting?
I was talking to a friend of mine on the phone, just crying and stuff like that, and he was begging me not to do nothing.
So you really were talking to somebody on the phone?
Oh, yes, I was.
And your friend was asking you not to do something,
I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I was going to jump on him or whatever.
Why did you shoot him?
Why did I shoot him? For the things he's done to my son and a bunch of other kids, I found out later. I figured I was going to get the chair. I didn't know. I really didn't. But I knew that he wasn't going to fool any kids anymore, so that's all that counted in my heart.
Do you think you should have served jail time?
That was the judge's decision. I've been a very good citizen in the community.
These days, Gary works in sales, is still married to his wife of 31 years, and remains close to his children, especially his son Jody, the victim of kidnapping and sexual abuse. Any regrets?
No regrets. I just regret shooting a human being, having to be put in that situation. We were the victims.
Andrea Clessy, WBRZ.
I agree.
But,
I agree 100%. And as we, said before, I don't know exactly what I would do in that situation, but asking me sitting here right now, if that happened to anyone that I loved, I would probably end up doing the exact same thing, and I would not have any regrets about it.
Well, they say that you take a bullet for your family, but luckily there's not a lot of bullets flying around. So just gonna be thankful for now that I have not encountered that situation. And I hope I never do. I hope I never know what I would do in a situation like that.
Right.
But I think I might do the same thing.
I want to say, you got the guy. I saw the shirt. I was going to ask about the shirt when I first saw it, and then I was like,
The shirt from killercultureshop.com. It's killer culture. So of course I had to wear it. I've been saving this story. It's one of my favorite ones. When I first learned about it, I actually cried because I was so emotional, because I was like, oh my God, like just watching the video, and he's like, why, Gary, why? It almost seems like he's, I don't know, like a desperate, like, why would you do this? But Gary was just so sure if it happened to you, you'd do it too. So
let me ask you a question. Is there a chance maybe in a different state of mind you could put yourself in where you could actually be not necessarily empathetic to a pedophile, but understanding? And the reason I'm asking this question is, what if that person grew up as being molested as a child, and all that trauma that they grew up with?
there are plenty of people. There are plenty of people who grow up being molested as a children.
Well,
who don't grow up to molest.
I'm not trying to make
children.
excuses for anybody's behavior. I'm just saying that.
No, I know you're not. I know you're devil's advocate, but
Right.
I am not a pedophile apologist by any means. I think that I've never been able to understand how someone could see a child like that, and it disgusts me. So, I don't know. I could never accept. I just could never accept, even if there was like some scientific explanation. I don't know that I could ever accept it.
I don't know if I could accept it either. I find myself though feeling sorry for people who do bad things. Not feeling sorry for them like I want to help them, but I feel sorry for them because I always feel like something has to be wrong with that individual. Now, I'm not saying these people who go around and mutilate and eat people like you talked about on some other episodes of the show. Those people are flat out evil. But
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this guy wasn't flat out evil. But sometimes when I tell you again, sometimes it'd be hard for me to go pull the trigger in reality, because I do find myself being a little bit of empathetic to even some of the most egregious people of our criminal system, probably more than I should.
That's why you're on the superhero side of things. You're the superhero side. I'm the anti-hero side. So that's why I said there's two types of people in the world. You can determine
Oh yeah.
who's going to like Gary, who's not, just depending on if they like revenge or if they don't.
Team Gary.
I don't know.
I'm still Team Gary.
Oh yeah, I'm Team Gary forever. Vigilante justice.
Yeah.
But there's definitely times when vigilante justice goes wrong, when a mob mentality takes over, and people do things without facts. But I think that Gary had plenty of facts in this case to do what he did.
Right.
So it's disturbing. But I am glad that Jody made it out.
Me too.
He became very successful later in his life, and he continues to be successful. Gary had a stroke in 2011. He ended up passing away in 2014, but he lived the remainder of his life as well, being a good father, being married to his wife, June. He did have 4 children total. Jody was just the youngest one. So I think that he has probably lots of family around him for the rest of his life. And this was, to me, a happy ending story.
Let me speak a little bit.
The happiest one we've had.
Well, let me, if I can, just delve into the father aspect of this story, because imagining still the grief, the forever grief this father probably has dealt with. And I know Jody, in being the actual victim, unimaginable, and then being a victim advocate, hearing these stories over and over and over again has to remind him at some point his own story.
Oh yeah.
Even though he doesn't want to share it and tell the details. Also, having a father who loves his child to the point where he did this thing to murder another person out of love, to have to still hold on to that anguish and that heartache. He was missing for a long time, and then knowing what was done to him. And even if Jody never explained to him in detail what happened, the idea of the things that may have transpired is enough to, stress a father out, or a parent out. I just can't imagine what this guy had to go through. And I'm glad he got back with his wife, the mother, and I'm glad Jody was able to grow up and be successful. But I just this whole story just made me stress, just hearing it. And I'm glad for everybody that needed to work out for. It worked out for, and it ended up being justly so worked out for the victim, meeting his untimely
I think
demise.
justice was served.
Justice served.
Justice was served, in my opinion. I know that Jeff's brother said it wasn't. Gary did not serve any prison time for what he did. He had 700 hours of community service and 5 years of probation. So actually, it may have been less. I think it may have been 300 hours of community service. Don't get me lying. But either way, he served no prison time. He got to go back to his family. And the judge said, I don't think he's at risk of ever doing this to anyone else. I'm sure that no pedophile would ever fuck with his son after that, for sure. So I don't think he'd ever been put in the position to do that again. And so he just didn't find a reason to put him in prison. And I think that
Listen,
how it should be.
No pedophiles, no bullying for any of the other kids, nothing for the rest of their lives. They grew up and went to school when nobody messed with them.
With those kids.
Hands off.
Exactly. For sure. But it was a pleasure having you, Brian. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Since Autumn cannot be here, sorry, Autumn, we didn't miss you at all. We had a great time without you.
Thank you.
So,
this has been fun.
Thank you so much, Brian. And everyone, be sure to like and subscribe. And I know that you're going to go head over to Drinks and Discussions Sports and check Brian's other feeds out. And be sure to check out our other channels. You never know what you will find on there. And speaking of you being a father, we even have Caden with his own channel. He popped up on my video last week. We had a little, somewhere in the video there's like a little of Caden. I'm like, it's like a just relief from the horrific things we were talking about. But be sure to check out all of our other channels, and we love you, ghosties. Thank you so much. Come back next Saturday. We will be here again, and I'm expecting Autumn to be back here. And who knows what we're going to talk about? Something dark and disturbing. So thank you, Brian.
Welcome. Bye, everyone.
Okay, good night.